The age-old question of hand welded versus Goodyear welded. It's always difficult to articulate the difference, especially to someone that's not really familiar with the actual construction process. Until now. I've got a Goodyear Welted shoe here from Goodyear and Handwelted, and I've got a fully handmade shoe, hand welded shoe from Acme Shoemaker. And as you can see, I cut them in half. I want to start with some of the basics, and let's start there while we enjoy the process of cutting these two shoes in half. Goodyear welded construction is the staple of a traditional quality made shoe. It's really like the standard for kind of whether or not a shoe is in that category or not. What Goodyear welded construction is, when they take the leather insole, they're going to glue this canvas gemming to the bottom of the insole, and then when they last the upper to that, it kind of joins and creates this like rib right here. And then the Goodyear welt machine, the machine that actually like does the stitching, is going to go through and actually create that little stitch right there, which you see right here. It's a black thread, so it makes it a little easier to see. But to create that stitching right there that goes through this sidewall, and it comes out right on this other side, which holds the welt together. Once they're ready to finish it, it kind of comes over here. They lay in the cork right underneath that, attach the outsole, and then actually like stitch the outsole to the welt. So the welt stitch is this cross stitch that's going right in there. And then the outsole stitch is this like vertical stitch that you see right at the front that goes from the front of the welt into the outsole. So there's two different stitches here that we're talking about. When we talk about a hand welded shoe now, this is still a welded construction. It still has the same core components. The main difference is that it's all done by hand. And because of that, it allows the shoemaker to have a little more control over some of the tolerances, but it also allows them to use fewer materials to accomplish it. And by doing so, it creates a little more rigid construction. The thing that you're gonna notice that's missing is that canvas gemming. So what they're actually doing is they're using a much thicker insole. You can kind of see that here. What they're doing is they're actually going through the bottom of the insole, creating these tiny little holes that they're going to thread the welt stitch through, and then they lay the welt right out here, just like it's done here, except when they do that, they're able to pull the welt in a little bit tighter and create a much more flush bottoming. And because of that, you know, there's not as large of a cavity. So when you look at the inside of a Goodyear welded shoe compared to a hand welded shoe, the main differences are going to be the thickness of the insole, the amount of cork that's needed to kind of fill in that cavity. You still have the two main stitches. The one is the hand welded stitch, which is actually like from this point right here, where the leather upper kind of wraps around into the insole. You can kind of see that white stitch right there. So that's the welt stitch, and then the outsole stitch is the one that's right there. So the one goes into from the upper into the actual leather of the insole, and then the other one is at the front right there. Looking at some of the biggest like visual differences between the two, and then kind of translating that into, is that a tangible benefit or tangible disadvantage based off of actually like owning a pair of these? Well, let's take a look first just by looking at a pair of shoes that is not cut in half. The two examples I have here is obviously one from Acme Shoemaker, because this is going to be the same exact shoemaker as what we looked at right here. A little bit different style, obviously, but overall the construction's the same. Next, we're going to look at TLB Majorca for their Goodyear Welded. And while their Artista line is a fantastic shoe, it's not quite on the level of Goodyear and Handwelted, but I'll say they do use many of the same core concepts, and you know, the fact that they have a very narrow waist, they really are employing a lot of the same techniques, so this will kind of allow us to see those differences in the actual shoe. Starting with the Goodyear Welded shoe here, you can see, you know, you got the outsole stitch going around here. You can see it does have a very refined kind of bevel and narrowing going into the waist, and then around the heel you still have the welt that's going around, and you know, it's just a very elegant, very refined shoe. When we look at the rubber and the leather welt, that's the difference between those two main components. So right in here is where that cork would be as well, except you can't see it because I didn't cut this one in half. When we look at the hand welded example, I think the differences are going to be quite noticeable. You can see the outsole stitch is quite different. It's a much finer stitch with the fudging that goes all the way, almost looking like it's going under the upper. Then when you come to the waist here, this is what's called a blind welded waist. And when we look at that in reality, what's happening is they are pulling the welt stitch in all the way to the center of the shoe basically here. And then that's still getting welded, but it's just getting, you know, hidden. It's something that you don't have to worry about whether the machine actually has the ability to be like that nimble and kind of get into these finer, intricate spaces. Somebody's hands are doing that, so they can really control every millimeter of space here. So when we talk about the fudging, I mentioned earlier, you can see the stitch density is higher on that pair of Acme, and then the fudge detail is much more, you know, just intricate in detail. One of the main reasons for that is the order of like operations of how they do things. So on a Goodyear welted shoe or a factory made shoe or something that has the outsole stitching done by a machine, they can't really count on that machine to be able to hit every single one of those like crevices of the fudge wheel. So what they'll do is they have to stitch this first, and then they go ahead and add the fudge detail to the welt afterwards. Here they can put the fudge detail into the welt first, and then because they're stitching it by hand, they can really control and make sure that they hit every you know, crevice of the welt as they're going through, and it just makes for a much more detail and like refined level of finishing on a pair of handmade shoes. That's a lot of the visual differences. Is something that probably like help you as a casual observer, just kind of looking at a shoe and noticing whether it's, you know, a Goodyear welted shoe or a handmade shoe. But when we look at some of the tangible benefits that you may actually like feel when you're experiencing these two different shoes, it's going to come down to a lot of the structural support that's built into the upper of the shoe. When we look at the Goodyear welted shoe, you can see the support that's inside of here is these are like Celastic stiffeners, I believe, and not really making any judgment on the efficacy of the material, just saying like that's what it is, and because of that, there's a lot more like give to it. It's not as strong as using a real leather stiffener like what you see here. You can see there's much less give. When we look at the hand welded shoe, you can see that this is actually using leather toe stiffeners and heel stiffeners. You can kind of see on the layers of leather back here around the heel right here. So there's like 2 layers of black leather, 1 layer of the suede that's on the heel, and then there's a middle layer right there, and that's the heel stiffener. Now that goes all the way through into the arch support. So when you kind of, you can like hear it right there. There's support that goes all the way through here. When we look over here, there's not support. So if I just pull this apart a little bit, you can see this extra layer of leather that's right in between here. It's kind of the same exact leather that you saw back here at the heel, and that is that extended heel and arch support, that countering that's going all the way through, that's propping up your arch and really giving you, you know, the benefits of what a handmade shoe does. That same support just is not going to exist in a Goodyear welted shoe. Since the Goodyear welted shoe has about 4 to 5 millimeters of cork, at least in this example, that's going to break in, it's going to compress, and it's going to kind of redistribute itself as your foot creates that imprint on the insole. On the hand welded shoe, it's only about 1 millimeter of cork, so you're going to have a much more consistent fit over the extended number of years. Now that could be a good or a bad thing, but it's definitely going to be something that you notice. This was definitely just an overview and initial impressions of getting the shoes cut apart, looking at them, kind of picking out some of the biggest differences or commonalities. Let me know if you have any questions or if there are aspects of these two construction types that you would like to kind of deep dive into, and I can make that a priority for the next video. Thanks all.